Hey everyone, welcome to our Acctivate version 11 Picking Enhancements webinar. I'm Eva Rhees and I'm the Client Solutions Specialist here at Acctivate. So let's get started. The picking enhancements that we're talking about today refer mainly to warehouse picking and how those functions can help optimize your processes for fulfillment. This is going to be incredibly helpful for those with a larger volume of small orders, like with e-commerce sales orders, or those that need to get larger orders out the door more efficiently. We're going to be going over the new warehouse layout and how to batch pick your sales orders with route optimization so you aren't having to walk around the warehouse multiple times to pick one order. So the first thing to understand about our new picking enhancements in version 11 is that they are made specifically to go with our multi-location control module. So you're going to need to have this module enabled in order to utilize all of the functions. If you aren't sure if you already have this module, you can email either support@acctivate.com or sales@acctivate.com. I've listed also some of the requirements that you're going to need to have done in the system itself and configured before you can start using the new picking enhancements. I'll also put a knowledge base article that talks more about these requirements in the description for the YouTube video itself, so you can find it later. So here's the new warehouse layout that I've completed in the layout editor of Configuration Manager. When you open Configuration Manager, you're going to go under Inventory and then under Layout. My layout includes rows of product bin locations, and I'm going to show you the different functions and how to actually create this layout. But first, let's talk about your bin locations themselves and how they are set up. So my locations are referring to specific shelves in my rows of product, and so I've added positions to them. So that way I can use those in my layout editor and not have to worry about placing the A over the B over the C all squished together. So the position actually allows me to kind of place all of those locations that are in that position at one time. So if we look at my location, my first one here, the C01A, C01A, C01B, and C01C all belong to position C01. So instead of having to map the location for A, B, and C, I just map the position in my layout for Z01. My locations are set up this way. That doesn't mean that yours have to be. Mine also use letters and numbers. Also, doesn't have to be set up that way. You can just use numbers, you can just use letters, whatever works for you. And if you want some help in configuring your locations in the best manner possible, you can search the Acctivate knowledge base for bin locations, read those knowledge base articles, and you can also reach out to the support team. All right. So now we've talked about how those locations are set up. So let's talk about how to configure the layout itself. First, I'm going to start with the buttons at the top. And one tip that I have for you before we go through all this is save often. The undo button here is only going to go back one step or one action. It's not going to undo multiple times. So save often. I did a couple of clicks and then I would save and go into edit mode again. It's just, especially if you're a perfectionist like me and you want to make sure that your lines are square and things like that, saving often will help you. Before you start mapping it out in Acctivate though, one thing I would suggest is drawing a diagram of your warehouse on paper. It's going to be a lot easier to refer to that when creating the layout than it is to remember where things are in the warehouse itself. All right, so we're talking about the different buttons now. The pathway button is used to tell Acctivate where your users can walk in the warehouse itself. If there are things in the way in real life, then you need to put in the walkways around that object. So I put the walkways in last in my layout, and it's best that they actually touch each other when you put them in, or the system may not know that you can walk in between those two, and it may have you double back or go a different way that actually may be longer, things like that. And these are all referring to how Acctivate is going to do the route optimization to give you the closest and most concise route to pick multiple orders. All right, now we have the one-way path. I didn't use any one-way paths in my layout itself, but they would be useful if you have set lanes for types of traffic. If you have carts on the right going one way and forklifts on the left, things like that, then that's when you would want to use that one-way path. The same rule applies here, though, that the pathways do need to be touching if you want to show that they connect to each other. All right, now let's talk about the boundary. I actually used the boundary to outline my entire warehouse so I could visualize my shelves within it. That's not completely necessary, but I did it for my own sanity. You can also use the boundaries for any physical obstacles that may be in the way, or, desks, tables, things like that. And you can make these lines touch or not, depending on what you're creating with them. That part doesn't really matter. All right, so I used the place locations function to put my locations in along the boundary lines for the shelves themselves. It cut down a lot on the time it took to get the locations in the right spot. And it did help that my locations are set up chronologically. 1 is next to 2 is next to 3. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can use the place locations function when you don't have them set up chronologically. Last, I think the scale functionality is actually pretty cool. It allows Acctivate to calculate the amount of feet it will take you to walk around and pick a batch of orders that you put in the pick list. And I'll show you what I mean in a specific example. Just a fun little tidbit there. All right, so this is me showing you how to add a boundary line, a pathway, and use the place locations function. So when you're using the place locations, you're going to want to hold down the shift key on your keyboard to select more than one location at a time. They don't have to be in order. And then you're going to want to put your arrow facing the last position that you want them in. So mine, I wanted them from the bottom up. And so you'll see me create the arrow from the bottom up. Now the last thing we need to do in our big checklist that we talked about earlier is actually enable the use of pick lists. I was talking about that knowledge base article that's going to give you that checklist, but you can also find the checklist article by just clicking here where it says view checklist for enabling this feature. That will take you to that article itself. And then we have some other options here. We can pick and fold by default, and I'll go into more detail on what that means in a minute. And then we can also create pick lists for only certain warehouses. So if you have a warehouse that's an in-transit warehouse or something that's not a physical warehouse, maybe it's an Amazon FBA warehouse or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily want to use pick lists in it because you're not selling out of that warehouse itself. things like that, or maybe you're not picking out of that warehouse ever. All right, so let's talk about the daily operations of how you're going to use the pick lists, what you're going to do in Acctivate to print them out, things like that. So if you want to do a batch pick of a few orders at once, you can use the order manager to select which orders you want to create the pick list for. In my case, I have 5 orders here. I've gone up to action and I'm selecting create pick lists. This is going to prompt you on if you want to create one pick list for each warehouse found on the orders, and in my case I do. Here is the pick list window. You'll find this by selecting the pick list icon on the icon bar. You can find the pick list from within each of the individual sales orders, and you can also go up to the sales menu and select pick list. So this window is going to open up and you'll be able to see your latest pick list. You can pick the orders using a paper picking sheet just like normal and printing out the pick list. And you can also use mobile devices still. So this is the little tidbit I was talking about when we were talking about the scale. It has me walking 647 feet. I don't know what the step count is on that, but sounds like a pretty good section of my day. If you look here at my actual detailed list, you'll see that I'm picking 2 products from the same location. If you have one item on multiple orders, it will show up in a similar manner. You'll have 2 lines for that item, and you'll have the separated quantities, so that way you can put the item into separate bins on your picking cart if you're using one. The second column in the detail section relates to the bottom right corner of the window. This is the key of the orders. So when I'm picking line 1, it's for order A1523T, but all you see up here is order A. The letters are also typically going to correspond to separate bins on a picking cart with those letters. Speaking of picking carts, this is the type of cart that we've been typically seeing for batch picking. Each bin would be labeled with a letter that would then correspond to a sales order. This method of picking allows you to quickly package the orders for shipping, as all you have to do is take what's in that bin and put it into a box, slap the label on it, and ship it out. If you don't use a cart like this and you just lump all of the items together, that's fine. It'll just take a little bit longer to separate them out afterwards. The standard pick list report is something that you'll see like this. We include that sales order key on the bottom so you can make sure when you're packaging orders that you select the right label. You'll notice that my quantities picked are already filled in, and that's because I have the option selected in the configuration manager to pick the batch and full automatically. You can also turn that off and allow your pickers to go back into the Acctivate system to fill in the correct picked quantities and mark the pick list as completed as well. So either way, you can have it picked in full, or you can have them have to go back into Acctivate and fill it out. Up to you. And on the standard report, we can even have this blank and you can double check that they picked in full, things like that. So this is the route that the system is having me walk around the warehouse in case you're a visual person like me and need to see how it's grouping my locations to have them pick it in the quickest route. Keep in mind I made this graphical representation myself, so the system is just going to give you the location ID. It's not going to give you a walking path itself. If you watch closely, it's having me go from L to P and then back to M things like that that are actually going to be quicker in the long run. You can also definitely still just pick one order at a time. That's completely fine. Especially if you need to get the order out of the door really fast, or that's just your process, whatever it is. So I have the ability to create pick lists for that single order. Of course, in Order Manager, like with the batch, but I can also create them on the sales order window itself. I can hit create pick lists. That button that you see for create pick lists is what we're calling our new action button. And then next to it, you see the action menu. Those are actually going to be gone into in more detail in our last webinar of the version 11 series on the 22nd. So tune in for that. You'll also notice that there's a new pick list tab on the sales order that will show you what pick lists exist for that sales order, because you can have multiple pick lists for one order. So you'll see that this order has now changed status after I selected to create the pick list, and the pick list tab has a warning symbol on it because it has an open pick list related to this order. So I can select now to print the pick list if I just want to print this one. I can also just go in and go to the action menu here and mark it as picking completed, whatever I need to do there. Now, if you're using mobile devices, you'll be able to use them for picking your batch pick list quickly. Instead of the sales orders that you see a list of, you're going to see a list of pick lists, and then that's when you'll see the list of items. You'll be able to go through and pick each as it comes up. You'll notice at the top it has the letter for the order number and the location ID, and then underneath that it has the actual product. You're going to be scanning the barcodes and the lot numbers just like before. Nothing's changed there. Then you'll submit the pick list as completed, just like you did before. Now that's just about it for what I have for the advanced picking functions themselves. Let's go ahead and take some of your questions. All right, so let's go ahead and open up for questions, and we'll see what we get in the chat itself. If you're not viewing the live webinar on the YouTube page and you want to chat with me and ask some questions more specifically about maybe your scenario itself, then you'll need to go to the YouTube page itself and go ahead and put the questions in the chat. So we did get one question coming in during the session itself, and this question I'd just like to elaborate on it because I think that it's something that can be confusing. And the question is, how about a location that may have shelves within the location with different products? So small products on a shelf. And that is definitely handled with the use of positions. So the position is a separate column from the location ID. So if in the beginning I showed you the location ID, the position in the next column, and then we had the zone. So you'll have location IDs for every single individual bin that you'll place items into. And then you'll have the position to actually denote maybe all of the locations on that shelf, or all of the bin locations within a certain section. That's just going to help you, if you use the position that way, it's going to help you to map just the positions when you're doing the warehouse layout editor, and you don't have to go through and make sure that you have all of the teeny tiny bins in the right spot. So I'll wait a few more minutes and see if we have any other questions come in. Of course, if you are watching this after the fact, after the live session itself, you can always email your questions to support@acctivate.com, or you can chat with them on the knowledge base or at acctivate.com/support. So one thing I do want to clarify while we're waiting for some questions to come in is that the module you will need in order to use the new picking enhancements is the multi-location control module. You can work with your salesperson, or you can just talk to Acctivate support to make sure that you have that module itself. This is a good question. Can kitting work within the picking function where picking components to make kits? Absolutely, yes. We can definitely still do kitting within the picking function. In fact, we are going to walk you around the warehouse and show you the locations for each of the individual components themselves and make sure that you're getting all of the components. And then when you actually go to packaging, your packing slip or whatever you're using for the packaging process itself can have the components listed under the nested final kit product. Quick reminder for those of you on the live session itself, this is the second out of 3 for our Acctivate version 11 webinars. The last one will be on the 22nd, and we will be going over our order processing optimizations and how we've kind of changed up the workflow status a little bit on sales orders. So that's all that we have for today. If you have any questions, please email us at support@acctivate.com, or if you're needing to see if you have the module for multi-location control, you can contact sales@acctivate.com. And we'll see you next time.